Testing, testing, 1, 2, check, check. All right, I think we are live. I'm not sure actually, but hopefully you guys are hearing me. Let's see, 0 watching. Awesome. I'm sure people will come in here in a few seconds. Maybe not. I don't know. Either way, I'm going to go ahead and start here because I wanted to share a couple things, and I have a few minutes here. My daughter is at a doctor's appointment. There's a lot going on with that. Please keep her and my family in your prayers and thoughts and everything. She's doing well. She's recovering from surgery. She did have a little infection last week with a fever, and so we were in the hospital for another 4 or 5 days, and that was that. So I just want to start off. Canary Cry News Talk. We published an episode this morning. We talked about the FBI and Facebook's war AI and robots are people too, where Estonia, they're trying to make robots as people. And we've talked about that before in the EU and everything, but they're really pushing it in Estonia, the home of Skype. So they got some tech stuff that they're trying to implement. So anyway, hey, hi everybody, how you guys doing? Thank you guys for joining the chat and checking out the feed. I'm trying to have it here in the window so you guys can kind of see it. If not, no worries. But I wanted to just briefly touch on these stories, but then share with you a document that for some of you it might be old news, but I just think it's really important to look at and read and just highlight some points in light of where we are culturally right now and how divisive and just how angry everybody is, and it's just pretty crazy. So just wanted to say hi to a few people in here. Let's see, Brittany H, thank you for your prayers. Shining Wolf, let's see who else is in there. Black Cube Mystery, he's seen you on Twitter a few times. Let's see who else. I know there was another one in here that I saw that I guess there's a new feature where I can hit Alt or something and I can stop the chat or something. I don't know if it's working. Oh, is that it? Oh, I can pause it or trash a comment or a thing. Okay. All right. Learning stuff on the fly here. But, okay. So let me get into some of the stuff here real briefly. The stuff we talked about on News Talk. Facebook quietly enters StarCraft war for AI bots and loses. And it's kind of a funny story because these 8 people entered secretly the StarCraft bot competition, and they lost. They placed, I think it was 6th place out of 28 people. And the top 3 weren't even, they were just like independent coders. So the guys at Facebook are losing to random coders in, someone's basement, which goes to show that the public end of the whole Facebook AI thing, not so good, not doing too well. But the idea of all that stuff, we flesh it out in the podcast episode, so definitely go check that out if you want to dig in deeper. The other story, actually, you know what? Let me see if I can find the Zuckerberg awkward virtual tour, because he a lot of people picked up on this, but basically Zuckerberg did this VR, let me just move this over here, this VR tour thing, and he's in there and he's talking to this lady Rachel, and they go to Puerto Rico. They basically each one of these orbs represents like a different location or a 360 video of a different location. And Mark, goes there, and it's just really not very good to laugh and kind of joke around and like, oh, I can see your eyes and we can high five each other while they're in Puerto Rico. Not very good there, Mark Zuckerberg. So I just wanted to mention that. If you guys can watch the video, there's like a 10-minute video of him talking about just all the features of the virtual thing, and apparently tomorrow on Wednesday he's going to announce some things that pertain to the Oculus Rift and everything else. So keep that in mind. I know Facebook, they're really pushing for, all that stuff, to the AI, virtual reality, augmented reality stuff. And sometimes it's a little distasteful. And They don't have legs here. I don't know if you can see here, but these avatars don't have legs. So, yeah, whatever that means. Okay, let me get back to where was I? Okay, so all this race war stuff, right? Like, I sent a tweet out the other day, and some of you guys might have seen this. How many more times do we have to point out people are being baited into a race war before they realize they're being baited into a race war? And man, I think those of us who have been looking at these topics and looking at the New World Order and all this stuff, we've seen quite an unfolding of chaos in this country in the last year. And yes, a lot of truth came out and a lot of stuff was verified, like the Satanism and all that stuff going on, deep in our government. But at the same time, most people, and I'm finding this the more I spend time on Twitter, I'm finding that most people are they're outraged for one reason or another. And it's driving me kind of nuts because there's so much more to it than the vacuum of the now, right? Like everything that you are outraged about now has a lot of history, has a lot of unspoken of history, like history that you don't hear about in your history class because it's all hidden stuff, even though it's publicly published and everything. So this is one of those things, and I think the race war thing, the headline that really grabbed people's attentions was, where was it? I have it here somewhere. Let me got rid of it. I know the headline here. It's the Newsweek article about white Christian male or something like that. Here it is. There you go. The far right won't accept Las Vegas killer was a Christian white male. And of course, they go into their whole spiel here. And then Alex Jones, on the other hand, is pushing the whole ISIS thing from his sources. And so it's very confusing right now, right? Like nobody knows exactly what's going on with the whole Las Vegas shooter and all this stuff. And I know people have done good investigative research to come up with different things like, multiple gunshot or multiple gunmen, all those details, right? And I've been looking at them, but I don't know, guys. I wasn't there. I know people who were there. And, I haven't really sat down and talked to them a whole lot yet, but there are people that got hurt that I know I know people who know people that got hurt, and even someone that was killed in the event, or allegedly, at least that's what my friend that was there told me, and family even that were supposed to be there. So yeah, the event itself, definitely something happened. Definitely people got hurt, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't planned or there's not a deeper agenda here. And this whole thing about, he's a Christian white male. I mean, I don't know, but this seems like propaganda to me. But regardless, here's a document that some of you guys may be familiar with. This was published, I think, in 1999. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Freedom of Information Act, section cover sheet. Let's see, Christian Identity Movement. So this was April 28th, 1999, I believe. And this is from the director of FBI. Christian Identity Movement, right-wing terrorism matters. Think about this, folks. This is 1999. Okay, I'm going to read some of this stuff. Let's see, blah, blah, blah. Let me get to the stuff that's interesting here. Identity is an ideology that combines religious concepts with elements of racism. And let's see, Christian identity, hereafter referred to as identity, is a religious doctrine that is a major factor within the ultra-right movement in the United States today. It is recognized that many of the ideas espoused by identity are offensive, but it is believed that a complete discussion is needed to understand the motivation of the movement. Man, this whole thing is, I can just quote this entire thing. I'm going to read through some of this as well, so bear with me here. The proponents of identity often quote and provide explanations for biblical passages. However, these explanations have a racist slant, and they differ significantly from the interpretations of more mainstream religions and religious organizations. The advocates of identity often cite the Bible to support or legitimize their anti-Black and anti-Semitic beliefs. The Jews, according to the beliefs are the enemies of God and natural adversaries of the white race and chosen race of God. Blacks and other non-whites are usually regarded as unequal to whites. Interesting, right? I mean, it's just very strange that the FBI would be targeting these extremist right-wing terrorists as a sort of racist group of white folks that is combined with this Christian ideal as identity. So I just find some of the verbiage here very, very peculiar given what we're dealing with today. Okay, it's racism aside, the views of identity often parallel traditional biblical scholarship. In a religious connotation, identity is akin to fundamentalism in that the proponents of each study the Bible extensively and use it as a literal and infallible document for their beliefs. Identity, however, is far more reactionary than fundamentalism. There are no ties between the two despite some similarities. There are, however, significant differences. Foremost of these is racism. So at least there's that line, right? Identity is far more reactionary than fundamentalism. There are no ties between the two despite some similarities. And that's kind of the gray area, right? Like what becomes considered the extreme end and what's considered just, someone who is a fundamentalist. They're all trying to paint it as terrorism. So let me continue on here. Identity concerns the rise of white Christian nations. It seeks to discover a national as well as a racial identity for white Christians by telling them who they are and where they come from. Many identity beliefs are rooted in the 19th century British movement, British Israelism or Anglo-Israelism. This concept claims that Anglo-Saxons and others are the descendants of the biblical Israelites, and that England is the true Israel. Under identity, before I go on here, I kind of understand a lot of the folks that are in Bible prophecy that are very, very pro-Israel, like pro-modern-day nation-state Israel, with their money and guns, like sending all that stuff over, which I'm against personally. I think the Israel issue is very messy, and it's going to take a little bit more time to break down. I've done videos on it before. Definitely some nefarious things going on with the government of Israel, just as our government has some, nefarious things going on. So it's not so much like a racial thing or even, a religious thing per se. It's just more like, hey, there's corruption. And if you look at the history of the nation state of Israel, it's quite obscure in terms of its, not obscure necessarily. What's the word I'm looking for? It's messy. It's got a lot of propaganda holding up the mainstream beliefs of what happened. And I know some people don't like hearing that, and some people may be even turned off, and some people might even call me anti-Semitic for even mentioning that. But there is a difference here, and I can understand why some of those groups would be so against the idea of the fact that, in the Bible, Israel was replaced by the church. And I am actually not of that belief either. I don't believe that the church replaced Israel. That's not necessarily biblical either. I don't want to get into the whole Bible study, but in short, I believe when the word Israel is used in the Bible, especially in the sense of the New Testament, Galatians and Romans, I think chapter 8 and 9, that area, you could tell that Paul's talking about the believers, those who are the seed of Abraham, the children of the promise, and those who are grafted in, right? And so Israel becomes not just, the group that God chose, to carry out the Messiah and everything else, but us grafted in. So it's both. It's not, it got replaced or one or the other. It's kind of a bigger thing. And I think we just have to investigate it and look into it and, do a real study of it and not just like push people away if they say something that you're not used to hearing about the whole thing and consider it anti-Semitic. Or on the other hand, just like bash Jews. I know a lot of people are really into like, it's all the Jews controlling everything. Yes, they do control quite a bit. It's a small group of folks that control quite a bit. I think there's ties to the Vatican there, and you can look at Gladio and all kinds of stuff. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked here. This concept claims that Anglo-Saxons and others are, I read that, under identity. These concepts were changed to the view that the United States is the true Israel. Furthermore, other racist concepts that are based upon biblical interpretations have been added to those of British Israelism by the advocates of identity. Because these interpretations are speculative, some factions of identity may be more racist than others, and individual interpretations of the same biblical passages may differ. The fundamental resource of identity is the Bible. This document reveals to the advocates of identity the spiritual origin and physical history of the white race, as well as the rules and regulations that make life better on earth and which lead to eternal life. The Bible is also used to search out God's word and thoughts in order to understand, quote-unquote, the truth. According to identity beliefs, this truth is hidden, and although it is obvious to those of God's chosen race, the white race, it is not recognizable to all readers. I mean, I've never personally met anyone that believes this stuff, but you can tell that anybody who might be of, European descent, who is in America, who is a Christian, who may be, reading up or watching videos on this channel or channels like it, easily be labeled identity. Even if they don't ever say anything like this, if they say, oh, we're seeking the truth, quote unquote, the truth here, then all of a sudden, we can become targets, right? I mean, it's pretty amazing that they can write all this stuff in here. What, 20 or 18 years ago? What is it? No, I can't do math right now. What is it, folks? 22 years? Whatever it was, 19 years? Okay. One aspect of identity is here we go. There is no single document or set of documents which set forth the Bible's, scratch that. There is no single document or set of documents which set forth the beliefs of identity, because interpretations of the Bible can result in a wide range of viewpoints. There are often conflicting interpretations within the identity movement. For example, some identity publications are almost exclusively anti-Jewish, while others are largely anti-black. One aspect of identity is its interpretation of the origin of the white race. So again, I think what we're seeing here, and if you go on Twitter and you go on, Facebook, and you see all these people sort of, defending their side of the argument, it's very easy, because there's a lot of folks who can fall into and be labeled identity, Christian identity, because they're Christian and they're talking about anti-Jewishness, right? Or anti-blackness. Oh, the Black Lives Matter thing it's a ruse. It's funded by Soros. It's a, globalist plot, blah, blah, blah. Oh, okay. You must be identity. You must be part of this problem, this white nationalist right-wing problem. See how this is like all sort of people are being baited into saying things that can be pigeonholed as identity or as Christian identity. It's quite remarkable if you really think about it. So let's see. One aspect of identity is its interpretation of the origin of the white race. Let's see. It is taught that Adam and Eve were the first white people from whom all other white people descended. God, it is believed, created Adam from the dust of the earth and then created Eve to be his companion, and Adam and Eve were placed directly into the Garden of Eden by God. Identity, therefore, views the garden as having been an actual site, the location where the white race originated. By using numerous geographical, biblical, and linguistic references, identity places the garden in Central Asia. Another identity teaching is that Adam and Eve were created only after all other races and peoples existed on Earth. These other races and races of color, such as the blacks, Asiatics, and Latinos, were not, according to some interpretations, created directly by God, as were Adam and Eve. Rather, they developed through a lengthy process of evolution, originating from the ashes of the earth and residue from the earth's creation. Because the white race is God's chosen race, only whites have immortal souls, and or all others are eternally damned and cannot obtain salvation. Other interpretations, however, reflect that the black race was created by God. Therefore, God created Adam and Eve, and that blacks and whites were the only original peoples that existed. The blacks had a specific purpose on earth, that is, to be servants to whites. Oh, my goodness. I mean, boy, I don't know where the FBI gathered this information back in '99. I mean, I'm sure they got it from somewhere, but man, I mean, this is just like ridiculous. Identity also states that Jews were neither created by God nor did they evolve. According to this view, the Jews are the children of Satan and the enemies of God. During the period before God's creation of Adam, Satan interbred with the races of color to produce the Asiatic Jew and the black Jew. The white Jew was created when Satan interbred with Adam's descendants. The Jews are often referred to as the children of darkness because they are the children of Satan, and there exists a battle between them and the white race, the children of light, for supremacy on earth. Oh man, I mean, boy, it's again, it's startling. It's amazing to read this from 1999 And then look around now. It's almost like racism wasn't even a thing, or I mean, obviously it's been a thing, but it definitely became less of a problem, I think, in society. And I think most of us living today don't necessarily experience the kind of racism that people are perpetrating, or the kind that, the early Americas and, the kind of African American slavery, that kind of stuff. Yes, there are elements of it now, but it's not exactly the same, right? It's not like people living on plantations and stuff. There's a different kind of racism, I think, that may be going on, but it's not. It's more institutional. It's not so much, like the kind that people are pushing nowadays. But it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because now that everybody is starting to, jump onto the race topic, people are being forced to either defend their own race, especially a lot of European descent folks that I see on like Twitter and stuff. They're like really against racism. They're like almost too outspoken about it. And then I see the other side where it's like, the red ice radio types who are very much, like we got to preserve the white race or the white cultures, which to me, it's like, if I'm looking at Europe, it's like, yeah, the people in Europe deserve to protect their land. I mean, you got all these people coming in from the Middle Eastern countries, which have been systematically destabilized, and they're coming in and they're basically taking over. I know England's been taken over basically. So it's all systematic. I don't think it's just as simple as, oh, we're either not accepting or are accepting the refugees, and therefore, what's the Christian thing to do? And people get tied up in that discussion, where I think Christians especially should be aware of the greater agendas happening here, and really not just try to solve, the surface problem, but really dig into the real stuff going on behind the scenes. And then we can start to understand, okay, there's a greater agenda here. It's not so much racism. It's not just, these people were kicked out of their country or whatever because of terrorists or whatever. There's a lot more going on. How are these terrorists being funded? How are blah, blah, blah. You can just go down a whole rabbit trail. And, I think we can come together in looking at who's really behind this, which is the enemy. It's a spiritual enemy. It's not necessarily one group. Surely there are groups that are in control and doing the bidding of Satan. But as the Bible says, people, especially the elites and stuff, they will be deceived, and they will continue to deceive. So, this is going to happen. This is prophesied to happen in many ways. But within the church, I think my hope is that, the Christians out there are try to look at this from maybe a different angle, and not just like fall into the back and forth. I mean, I'm guilty of it too. I go back and forth sometimes on Twitter, and it looks like I'm defending Donald Trump, but I'm not. I'm just sort of pointing out the irrational lack of critical thinking that people do when they post stuff on Twitter, and it just like the blind hate of Donald Trump. And whatever you think of Donald Trump, I mean, hate is hate, and like people justify just like hating on him when it's not necessarily true, right? Not all the stuff, the hate sort of topics are true. So again, critical thinking out the window. Let me continue on here with this document a little bit more. Let's see. The followers of identity believe that God had intended to keep the white race separate from the other races. This is why Adam and Eve were placed in the Garden of Eden. Each race was made separate, distinct, and each had a specific place. Did I already read this? I may have already read this. Maybe not. Each race was made separate and distinct, and each had a specific place in God's order of things on earth. Before the creation of the white race, God's influence was missing on earth, and Satan roamed free. God created Adam and Eve to be the forebearers of a race to command all others, and to be the instrument through which he, God, would fight Satan on earth. For this, it would be necessary that the white bloodline remain racially pure. So, yeah, same kind of stuff that we've heard throughout history, in terms of especially eugenics in the 20th century. And you know what? I don't want to necessarily just read this all for you, because there's a lot. Oh, this is a section that I wanted to touch on here. Identity and Armageddon. Another aspect of identity is its view of the end of the world and the second coming of Christ. Identity, to be sure, is not unique in itself or in its belief of this issue. Christians of many faiths believe that the world will eventually end. The last book of the Bible, the book of Revelations, pet peeve, guys. One of my biggest pet peeves is when they pluralize the book of Revelation. It's singular. Revelation. It's the revelation of Jesus Christ. That's what the book is about. It's not revelations, plural, but I digress. The revelation of St. John the Divine describes a period of great suffering known as the tribulation, the final segment of which is Armageddon, a great battle between the forces of good and evil that will precede the second coming. Many Christians believe they will be spared or enabled to survive the tribulations of and Armageddon because of their faith. Identity, however, teaches that white Christians, as the chosen race of God, have a specific role to play in these events, that they must be physically and spiritually prepared. Now, this makes me a little nervous, to be honest with you, because I've talked about some of these issues. That, there's going to be not necessarily the end of the world, the end of the age, as Jesus says, that there is a second coming that's looming. And I think if you look around how crazy things are getting in the world of technology and just the wars and rumors of wars and everything else, man, it's quite evident to me that some of the things that were written in the Bible are true and that they are becoming more and more fulfilled in terms of an ultimate fulfillment, being closer to that day every day. And I've also talked about, obviously, I talk about the book of Revelation. I talk about the tribulation period. I guess do I believe I will be spared or enabled to survive the tribulations? I mean, I don't know. It depends on your view of the rapture and everything else. I personally am a pre-wrath guy, so I think the seals itself are the wrath of Satan, so to speak, the wrath of the Antichrist. Excuse me. And after the sixth seal is opened, that's when the wrath of God begins, or actually the seventh seal, and then the seven bowls and seven trumpets are the actual judgments on the earth, and that's the wrath of God. Because you read after the sixth seal there that the sun, moon, star signs, the same sun, moon, star signs that are always being referenced for God's judgment. So again, I talk about these issues, but I guess I'm not white, so maybe I don't fit the whole bill on like being pinned as a guy to take the blame or whatever for some kind of domestic terror activity or whatever. But let me keep reading here. Identity views the events leading up to the second coming of Christ as inevitable. It is believed that these are part of a cleansing process that is needed before Christ establishes his kingdom on earth. During this, the forces of evil, non-whites and Jews, will attempt to destroy the forces of good. Destroy the forces of good. Whites, using any means. The result will be a violent and bloody struggle, a war in effect. The view of what Armageddon will be varies in identity. Some contend it will be a race war in which millions will die. Others will see it as an economic or social collapse that will lead to a communist attack or takeover led by the Jews as represented of the Antichrist. Oh my gosh, guys. Seriously. I mean, okay, so some contend it will be a race war in which millions will die. Others see it as an economic or social collapse, right? What is like the truth community been saying? Oh, there's going to be an economic or social collapse that's going to happen, right? The communists are going to take over, which for a while when like the New World Order stuff started, or at least when I started looking at it, I read some of the writings about like, oh, the communist and the socialist takeover. And at the time it was like, I don't know if it's going to look like that. I don't know if it's going to look all commie and socialistic as it did in the 20th century. But then I was kind of proven wrong the way things are unfolding now. But then this part right here is the kicker. A communist attack or takeover led by the Jews as representatives of the Antichrist. And my particular eschatology, and again, I could be wrong about this. I know there are different interpretations. I know there are people that have different beliefs and different timings of everything. And it's important for us to stay open about this stuff. We are talking about the future. We're talking about God's word and prophecy. And while we can get glimpses of what's to come, we don't fully know how things are going to be fulfilled because we're not God. Okay. So, this is my personal sort of place of where I'm at with the interpretation of who the individual, the man of sin, will present himself to be. And if you guys have been following my channel, you guys know that I really support the work of Chris White, And he's doing well, by the way. I know a lot of people ask about what he's doing, and he actually, if you go to his website, he did leave, or he wrote a post a couple months ago that said he's doing good and, you know, just living out his life. And I think he's working on some books in the meantime. But Chris really, in his book, False Christ, I believe, let's see, Will the Antichrist Claim to Be the Jewish Messiah? He lays out biblically that, yes, the Antichrist figure, the man of sin, it's very likely that he will present himself as the Jewish Messiah that they're waiting for. And that's why it's really alarming when, you know, Trump is being elected and all these rabbis in Israel like, oh, the Messiah is near, the Messiah is near. I mean, they've been saying that forever, so it's not like you put a lot of weight into it necessarily. But man, I mean, the concept of that being in this document from 1999 is really kind of startling. And you know, how are they going to pin this? Obviously, they can say anti-Semitic if you believe this, right? And they can make a sweeping generalization and call everybody who is a Christian, even if, you know, like myself, I'm not white, but they can definitely put me under the same sort of, you know, the crazy identity beliefs. He doesn't have to be white, but he believes all this other stuff, so therefore he is a terrorist or a threat or whatever. They can definitely do that. And here's the thing, the part that's really kind of crazy is that, and I mentioned this before, and this was a little bit earlier in the document, about how British Israelism and how, you know, these folks believe that, you know, the Jews basically descended through Europe, and so, you know, the Jewish bloodline is through the European royalty. That thing is crazy, because if the Antichrist, man of sin, appears, part of it, based on some scripture, is that he will present himself, or they will identify him as the offspring of David, King David, right? So that's, you know, genetic testing. That's the kind of stuff that, you know, would verify that he's from this line or that line or whatever. And, you know, when you look at genetics, it really does make the whole conversation about modern Israel very, very messy. So I don't want to get into that right now, but this concept of bioengineering and the DNA testing, DNA mapping and everything else, showing our family tree as a human race, that's really interesting to me. You know, I picture the entire human race as kind of like a tree, right? And this analogy is used in the Bible, but just think of it as a tree, and if we can trace back all of our lineages, right? And this goes into the reality of what's happening as well. So let me actually just do that real quick. Let me just flesh this out, because it's been on my mind a little bit, and I think it kind of helps put things into context, biblical context, in terms of the whole race conversation here. So we have, you know, Adam and Eve, and after Genesis 10, after the flood, right? 8 people off the ark, Noah and his children and their wives. And you have the Table of Nations. You have the 70 nations here that are distributed. And this is, you know, based off the work of Dr. Michael Heiser in looking at Genesis 10 and the Table of Nations, and going to Deuteronomy, did I spell it right? No, Deuteronomy 32, verse 8. And this is really interesting if you look at this, guys. Deuteronomy 32, 8. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided all mankind, he set up boundaries for the peoples according to the number of the sons of Israel. Except the NLT says his heavenly court. The ESV says the sons of God. Okay, so why is there a discrepancy? Why is it heavenly court, sons of God, but also sons of Israel? Well, this is based on, you know, the translation of which document you use to translate. And Dr. Heiser does a better job of breaking down why he believes the sons of God, or the assemblies of heaven, or the heavenly court, is a more accurate description. Because when you look at this, I mean, this event of dividing the nations is clearly talking about Genesis 10, right? When the nations were divided. But guess what? There's no Israel yet. There's no Israel. There's no nation of Israel until after, actually, right after this. For the Lord's portion is his people Jacob, right? So there's a distinction. How could it be divided under the sons of Israel if right afterwards God is choosing his people? So anyway, point is, Table of Nations here, and then right afterwards, Genesis 11 and the Tower of Babel, and everybody gets scattered, right? Everyone, goes their different way because the languages get split apart. Now think about sort of the basic kind of logical way to look at this. Once people were spread apart, it's pretty clear that these sons of God who rebelled and accepted worship on their own, they're I think they're talked about in Psalm 82. Yes, the divine council, right? And God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. He holds judgment over these gods. And so what's happening? These entities, these sons of God, who each took over a nation in Genesis 10, right? And then were split up in Babel. I think they accepted worship, and they took on some of the things that God is supposed to be for, like, worship and everything else. And then once the people started to rediscover each other, now we're under different languages, right? And maybe, I don't know how the genetics work, but, maybe because of the environmental pressures, or, we have different sort of skin tones or whatever it is. I don't know. I don't know about all that stuff. I know some people have done the research there, but yeah, that's sort of one of those issues where it's like, I think when they got back together because of the difference in language, and even maybe the way they look because of, for generations they've been in a different environment, now you have this racial tension that's developed. And so if we look at it from the biblical perspective, we're all kind of from the same 8 people, right? And how that diversified, I don't know. But if we're to believe the Bible, then we come from the descendants of Adam and Eve, and through Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their children and their nations. And that's how everything got spread out. And then as everybody was divided after the Tower of Babel and each went their own way, they had their own language and they had their own religions. This also explains all the different religions that popped up all over the world. And I mean, you study different religions, they have a very common theme about, sky gods coming down, teaching them knowledge, teaching them, the information about society and things like that. The Sumerians, I talked about this before, the Sumerians have the May mythology, which is the decrees of the gods that is foundational to those social institutions, religious practices, technologies, behaviors, mores, and human conditions that make civilization, as the Sumerians understood it, possible. This is all the arcane knowledge for society. And so, how did this even pop up? Where did this come from? Did it just pop out of nowhere, or, was humanity taught? And, but anyway, I'm kind of getting off track here. But the point being, I think when you look at this from a biblical perspective, we're all sort of the same. There's not a difference here. I know some people disagree with that. I know some people believe the whole serpent seed thing and all this stuff, but the whole concept of, there's no Jew, no Greek, free, slave, everybody is one under Christ. That's the reality of the situation. And, the secular sort of worldview tries to pick up on that, but it's actually biblical that we're all, created equal. Not that we are equal, but we are created equal, equal in value. And, man, people forget that. And nowadays people are just being baited into all this nonsense here. Let me go to the conclusion here about, let me continue on this whole Armageddon section here. Let's see. Okay, so we talked about the Jews as representatives of the Antichrist. Okay, many followers of identity believe, therefore, that they are among those chosen by God to fight the forces of evil during Armageddon. These people contend that they will be the last line of defense to save the white race and or Christian America from either the soon-to-occur race war or communist takeover. To prepare for these events, these individuals engage in survivalist, paramilitary, and self-defense training. They practice weapons use, and they store foodstuffs, ammunition, and other necessities of survival. They often reside in remote areas on isolated and enclosed compounds. I mean, wow. Just the whole prepper community here just, can be labeled identity because they're trying to fight Armageddon and protect the white race and protect Christian America from the communist takeover. Oh man, people are getting really, really baited into this kind of thing. It's crazy. So, in conclusion, here, this document, the identity message is one of racial hatred behind the guise of religion. I don't know why this is scratched off here. Let me try to read it. The Aryan Nations Church of Jesus Christ Christian in Idaho, the looks like Covenant, the Sword, the Arm of the Lord in Arkansas, and Elohim City in Oklahoma are some of the organizations that have followed Identity's teaching. Members or associates of some identity groups, particularly the AN and CSA, have been investigated for further involvement in criminal activities, including bombings, murders, robberies, and weapons violations. All of these activities have been carried out in furtherance of white supremacy, the basis for which is contained in identity. Man. Several members of this group were involved in an organization known as The Order, founded by Robert Matthews, an AN member. What was AN? The Aryan Nation member. Matthews was killed in December 1984 on Whidbey Island, Washington. I don't know. I can't read that right there. During a gunfight with the FBI. Order members were responsible for counterfeiting, armed robberies of more than $4 million, assaults on federal officers, the murders of a Missouri state policeman, and a Denver, Colorado Jewish talk show host, and other crimes. 38 Order members were arrested between October 1984 and March 1986 and convicted of charges relative to these acts. Several fugitive Order members were captured at the CSA compound in Arkansas, blah, blah, blah. So obviously, they're getting this stuff from a certain group here. Let's see. Gale was a major figure in the tax rebellion movement. Gale and members of a group Committee of States were arrested in Arizona, California, and Nevada in October 1986 for making threats against IRS agents. You know, it's like one of those things like, they were going against the IRS. Sounds like a good thing. I mean, you don't want to kill people necessarily or, arrest or take them out or anything like that. But, it's one of those issues where those of us, trying to understand the truth and trying to really understand everything from the biblical worldview. I mean, for me personally, anyway, I look at this stuff and I'm like, wow, man, we are totally being baited. And I can understand how, people can be drawn into this sort of thing, because of the way society and culture has framed this discussion in the mainstream media and the fake news and all that stuff. It's all part of this whole thing. And again, 1999 document, older document. Here's another one that's similar. I think it's based on the same document, but this one is also interesting. It's called Project Megiddo. By the way, this last one, I believe there's an FBI link. I'll leave the link to it in the description. I believe I did. This one's very similar as well. The attached analysis entitled Project Megiddo is an FBI strategic assessment of the potential for domestic terrorism in the United States undertaken in anticipation of or response to the arrival of the new millennium. And this is actually, most of it, if you read it, is about the Y2K thing. But clearly, it's got the same sort of concept here. Give me one moment here. I have to answer a text message from the wife. Second. Okay. So I'm not going to go through this one. Oops, dropped the phone. Not going to read this. You guys can read it on your own, but very similar in terms of, domestic extremism and, groups oriented with counterterrorism and things like that. Militias, cult members. They want, I was thinking about this the other day because the whole gun confiscation conversation, right? As soon as anything happens like Vegas, people are like, oh, gun control, we must do gun control. That's what most people say. Yet, gun sales go up, right? Like when stuff like that happens, everybody goes out and gets guns. They're like, oh, guns might become illegal. We need to go buy more guns. Why is that? Yes, I do believe that you have a right to bear arms and the right to, protect yourself. That's not really the issue. I'm talking about why are they almost baiting people to buy more guns? This is just, I'm thinking out loud here, but it's just one of those things that's really weird because maybe they are getting ready for a major, major breakout of a civil unrest, and I think it's gonna be pinned on whatever issue is going to bring everybody out, whether that be the race card, which seems to be working quite well for a lot of people, whether it be whatever it is, anti-president, whatever the best technique to get everybody into the streets to fight each other. That's what the elite and the globalists and all that stuff, that's what they want. They want division. They want to destroy America. They want to destroy you as an individual. You got to admit, America does have some freedoms that no other nation has ever had, really, in terms of, being able to express yourself. Now, it doesn't mean it's totally free. Obviously not. We've been under a very, systematic, occult regime for many, many years, if not centuries. And the people that are really behind all of the organizations today go back thousands of years, I think. I think if you really go to the top of the pyramid there, it's sort of the same people. And that's why they, boast about bloodline and all this stuff, is because I think they truly believe that they're descendant of the gods, and they have some sort of right to, control humanity in a certain way and steer, our lives in a certain direction to, have their outcome, which ironically, they're trying to create this sort of, utopia in their eyes, right? But it's funny to me because they know the Bible prophecies. They have to, right? The devil knows the prophecies, yet he still plays them out. He still fulfills them. How does that even happen? And I think it's being blinded by pride. It's being blinded by, self-interest. And those are virtues that have become mainstream in our world today. So anyway, I just wanted to share some of this stuff with you guys. Again, links are in the description. These are documents that really, jumped out at me when I first saw them a few years ago. And I was just reminded of them amidst all this stuff, amidst all the things here. It even has the New World Order conspiracy theorists, right? Oh, we're a threat. We're a threat. Gun control laws. Oh, no. They've been talking about this for a long time, guys, and they're trying to push things out. I think maybe they know time is short. In terms of the Trump thing, Trump is interesting. He's interesting because he appears to be fighting this whole thing, but in reality, it seems like he is also a part of it. Maybe not in the sense that he is directly a part of it, but he definitely comes from a family that has some ties to some very interesting backgrounds. You have the Tesla connection, and then recently I was showing some stuff from Del Shah and the early 1800s and the airship mysteries, and some of the paintings by Del Shah have the name Trump written across it. So those are really interesting things there. Let's see, what do I have here? Oh, this is just something I mentioned on Ground Zero about the technologies that they have. That Sony Corporation has the method for system of generating sensory data onto the human neural cortex, a method for projecting sensory data in a part of the human brain. Patented, guys. Patented in 2000. So for nearly 20 years, a company like Sony and many others have had the technology to control your mind through all this stuff. I mean, it's crazy. But anyway, let's see. Let me see what's going on in the chats here. What are you guys saying? Kind of ignored it as I was trying to plow through some of this info here. Okay, I see some flat earth discussion. As always, we can never get away from it. This is kind of hard to keep up with in terms of looking at what I should respond to. Circles are in the ball, pizza, spirits, blah, 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 blah. Remember, Satan wanted to be God. He most certainly knows the Bible and how to create chaos, turmoil, anxiety, depression, and fear. However, Christ has power over him, and we through Christ also. Yes, indeed, Laura, Sylvia, that is correct. Christ did defeat Satan on the cross. Satan's kind of like a squatter, like he's in charge of the world, but he's not really. Like he's controlling everything, but he's not really, he's not in ultimate control. And so, he's just waiting. He knows his time is short, right? So he knows that eventually he's going to get kicked out. And that's the hope that we have in all the stuff that's written in the Bible that's promised to us. A lot of flat Earth people. It's interesting to me. I know some people have said that I don't talk about flat Earth. Oh, the Chris White update was last August, so not a couple months ago. It was last year. Oh, has it been that long already? My gosh. That's sad. Time goes by really fast, guys. I think maybe some of the elite controllers are controlling our time, because I feel like time is getting shorter. Like it's already October 2000. We're almost in 2018. This is crazy. This is insane. Oh man. And let's see. You guys have any questions, or do you guys just have like statements about like how right you are? Why do we keep on sinning like nut jobs? Brad Ivan. Because we're fallen. We're in this fallen state. I kind of make it, the way I kind of look at it, okay, is, and I'm not new, I'm not the first person to think of this, but as we begin to understand, computer science and creation and all this stuff, in the quantum fields and how the universe is constructed and all this, there's an analogy with virtual worlds and how we can program, the laws of physics into any kind of virtual space and make it work. And those kinds of concepts have, I think, philosophically opened up a different view, or not different view, a more accurate view, so to speak, of what sin really is in this world. And I think sin, like really practical here, it means miss the mark and all this stuff. Literally, I think it is a virus, right? It is a programmed virus, analogous to, not, maybe necessarily literally in the sense of somebody sitting there programming a virus, but in essence, it is a systematic virus in this creation that causes decay and death, and everybody is infected by it. We are infected by it, and through sin is death, and also creation, because we are made from the earth. The earth, Romans 8, the creation groans, waiting for the day the sons of God are revealed. And so there's this level of even creation itself sees the decay and sees, the falling of us trying to uphold righteousness. We can't do it without Jesus, right? Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, because he demonstrated for us in so many ways that he is, not only is he God, but his way is the right way. And we tend to believe the lie that we can do it ourselves, that we can, figure things out on our own. But ultimately, I think that is going to lead to destruction. And that's what's going to happen with the wrath of Satan, and then obviously the wrath of God. Creation itself is going to be utterly destroyed by us humans doing things to it. And I wouldn't put it past the elite and everything else that they're going to mess reality up, in a sense, mess it up time-wise, mess it up in terms of dimensions or whatever. And that's why the book of Revelation is so incredibly interesting and, has that metaphorical side to it, but also a literal side to it, because the two aren't, necessarily going to be so distinct in the end times when all of this stuff unfolds, because supernaturalism is very real. It's sort of the base reality, and everything's going to, if they're basically messing up this reality, yeah, of course, God's going to roll this, roll the heavens up like a scroll, and, have a new heaven and a new earth. And so, I think we can start to understand some of these topics at a different rate or a different way in the modern context, not to change anything, but just to recast or reverbalize some of these biblical truths in the 21st century here. Somebody gave $15. That's kind of cool. Thank you so much. Who is that? Leo, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Let's see. I saw a couple different questions here. Let's see. I wonder where the 1,000 years in the pit takes place. Black Cube Mystery. I don't know, man. The concept of a place is interesting given these sort of realizations about like where we are. I'm not going to even get into it because I know people are going to get into the whole debate about flat Earth, and I choose not to participate too much in that. I've shared my thoughts on it in the past. Was one of the first folks, I think, in the Christian world to talk about it. Not the first, obviously, but one of the first, at least in this incarnation of it. Rob Skiba still blames us for getting him into the whole thing. Let's see, what else? Questions. Ooh, is KJ in here? Somebody said hi, KJ. Oh, there he is. What's up, KJ? How you doing, buddy? Hope all is good, man. Let's see. I'm not good at this. I need somebody to like moderate this. I keep saying that. I said that last time too, that I need a moderator, and I definitely didn't get one for this time. But this is very impromptu, guys. I just decided to do this instead of sit and work on a video because I wanted to share some of these things with you guys. Mandala effect is nothing. God is not the author of confusion. I agree with you. Let's see. What Shadow Poet? What do I do if I feel like God doesn't want me and that he's punishing me? Also, in light of the New World Order, how can I have a future? It's a good question. Well, let me just start off by saying, number one, I don't have all the answers, but Jesus does. So you can pray to God to give you wisdom on some of these things. But man, feeling like God doesn't want you, that's normal, man. We all struggle with that. Like, I think all of us go through periods of time when it feels like God is like either punishing us or, just doing stuff against the things we want. And our job is not to start, blaming God for that stuff. It's so easy to be like, God, I did this. I stayed pure or whatever for this long. Why are you punishing me like this now? And that's kind of not the way to go about it, because, God has his own timing, and it may not make sense to us. It may not even make sense to us in this lifetime, in our lifetime, but rest assured that he has a greater plan, greater than the New World Order, and it's all going to work out for good. And so that's why, I don't really sit around and fear anything, because I have that confidence that God is in control ultimately, and that he's allowing these things to happen. And yes, they are alarming. And yes, we each have a responsibility to share the truth, but also to, repent, and also to investigate these issues for ourselves so that we don't be deceived, right? I mean, the Bible says over and over again, do not be deceived, do not be deceived. It's in there several times. And so as Christians, I think it's important for us to just recognize that, like, hey, God's in control. God's got this. We talk about these issues and we dig into some of these particular things, but don't forget the fact that God's in control. Also, in light of the New World Order, how can I have a future? I don't know, man. That's kind of a difficult question. What do you mean future? Do you mean like have a family? Do you mean, just be able to live freely, or what's that mean? I'm not quite sure what you meant by that, but it's tough, man. I will say it is tough, because I mean, even for myself, trying to like have a regular job and stuff like that for a while, especially when I started to wake up to this stuff, was incredibly challenging. And so there is, I do, man, it's tough because I want people to make sure they have local communities where, churches or whatever, where they can, even if it's just a small group, to like get together and talk about these things and flush it out, once a week or whatever, because people don't have a place to do that really. And that's why people come online, people come to channels like this, or, KJ's channel or whatever, to kind of get their, not just a fix, but more of like hey, I'm glad I'm not the only person that sees this, right? Having a little bit of confirmation in terms of, hey, I'm seeing this corruption, I'm seeing this evil, and I feel like I'm the only person seeing it. But in reality, I think a lot of people are. They just don't necessarily share it, So don't be too down. I think we have to just continue to be salt and light. Share the gospel, expose evil, and be salt in that we prevent decay. We can be of use to God and have a purpose that exceeds what we even think we thought we were doing for the kingdom, right? You never know what's going to happen. So I would say trust in God, just read your Bible and stay faithful, because yeah, things are going to get tough, and I get it. It's difficult sometimes, but Go read Job. Go read the book of Job. That should be of comfort to you. I mean, some of the stuff he had to go through was definitely not stuff I want to go through in terms of God, testing my faith and whatnot. So let's see. Lots of people, this is Broken Glass 115. Lots of people wake up to Jesus after they wake up to flat earth because they realize God is real. Can you hit on this for everyone? Sure. Yeah. I have noticed that people, have been coming to Jesus through the flat earth movement. I personally haven't seen a whole bunch of people. I've seen people, talk about it. I've seen folks post on Facebook about it. There's a sense, I can't remember the passage. I don't know if I can pull it up right now, but there's a passage in there somewhere about if they're not, if they're not in your way necessarily, don't like hinder somebody from sharing the gospel. And that's kind of how I feel about the flat earth thing. Like, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I don't entirely disagree with the flat earth concept either. I think there's a very nuanced argument from the Bible with how to understand what the ancient Israelites saw and believed as their cosmology. And it's not, because here's the thing, here's the danger with like making everything perfectly literal in the material sense of a lot of what the Bible describes of creation. The danger is that, number one, you are, you hold that materialistic, quote unquote, literal standard to, you can't do it across the Bible, because all of a sudden stuff that's clearly metaphorical becomes, literal, and then you have terrible issues. Like I said, in the end of the age, I think some of that stuff, is there for a reason, the colorful language. But, also, let's see, where am I going with this? I had a couple of thoughts in mind, but see, the flat earth thing, I don't like talking about it because it's going to bother somebody eventually, right? I can't keep everybody happy. It's going to bother somebody. Someone's going to get upset or like throw Bible verses at me about like, well, what about this and what about that? And I get it. I understand all the arguments. And I think there are different levels of arguments. There's the argument from the Bible, and I think there's a good answer for that. Now, I'm not saying the earth is a sphere necessarily, okay, because I don't know that. I've said this over and over again, I've never been up high enough personally by myself to see what the shape of the earth is. So yeah, okay, NASA can tell me whatever, yes, they lie all the time, so it's not like I believe them. And I've said, like, either if there is a space, if all that stuff is true, then the NASA cover-up is not so much that the earth is flat. It might be that they've got all kinds of stuff going on up there that they're trying to hide from us. So that, there's a polarization here happening where there's more possibilities here. I just think it's an interesting discussion. If that leads you to Christ, more power to you, but don't think that your faith is built on the shape of the earth. Don't do that. That's the thing I'm concerned about with people who, say that, I've come to Jesus through the flat earth topic because it woke me up to the reality of the world and the lies. And hey, you know what? If that's where you're at, great, man. That's awesome. But don't just like conclude there and just say, okay, now everything I see that's, that is a lie, that, every aspect that I can measure is a lie, because then you start creeping into, and I'm not saying everybody does this, but some people, I've seen it happen. They start creeping into the Gnostic teachings that, this reality is, the flesh is, flesh is sinful, that, the reality of heaven is a non-physical thing. And yeah, I'm going all kinds of tangents here, but this is why I don't like talking about it, because I get caught up in all kinds of different directions. And trust me, guys, I have tried to put together videos about flat earth. Okay. And, it not only did it confuse me just to try to like piece it together, because I was trying to be as rational as possible in all directions. And it's almost impossible to do with this discussion because you're ultimately going to bother somebody. It's going to cause more division. And that's why I really haven't talked about it a whole lot, because people that are very, very adamant that the earth is flat, are I've noticed anyway, people that are there have not been the nicest people to those who don't necessarily jive with that worldview. So that's all I'm going to say about that. So if you came to Christ through that, great, awesome. But don't end your search there with truth. Don't, think that you got it all figured out. Again, I didn't want this to turn into a flat earth debate, and I've already spent too much time talking about it. So let me jump to other questions here. Let's see. Adam Android. Oh, what? This is amongst you chatters here. Let's see. Oh, let me say this as well. In terms of, there's a fly here. Oh no, demons must be around. I see a fly. Oh wait, somebody asked earlier about my poll question on Twitter. Let me just go there real quick. I think. Oh yeah, I got this whole thing. Here we go. Yeah, so I posted this here. What do you believe demons are? Disembodied. I tried to put disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, but it's too long. Dead, unsaved humans, fallen angels, or other. Most people agree that it's disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. 1% said dead, unsaved humans. 33%. Oh, interesting. 33% fallen angels. And I just threw this out there because I just wanted to get a feel for what everyone's thinking in terms of this topic here. Oh, man, a lot to get through here. I can't get through all the questions. I'll maybe have to do another thing where I'm just doing questions. Because ultimately what I wanted to talk about with this was the whole document here, this document. Okay, let's see. Old School Warrior asks, God is righteousness, so how could he have anything to do with wickedness when righteousness and wickedness have nothing in common? Okay, let's see. God is righteousness, so how could he have anything to do with wickedness? Well, I think there is a verse that talks about God is the, let's see, he's the author of evil, or author or creator of chaos, or something like that. I can't remember the exact verbiage here. That might not be the verbiage. No, that's not the verbiage. Author of, somebody help me out here in the chat. Do you guys know what I'm trying to look for here? Author of chaos, maybe? Was it chaos? No. Can't remember what it was now. Or I create evil. Maybe that's what it was. I create evil. I form create darkness. That's what it was. Let's look at the lexicon here. The one forming the light and create shape, darkness. Creating calamity, creating evil. All right, let's look at Isaiah. Now, this is unsettling for some people. People think, oh, God, this contradicts all of what God is and all this stuff. But I think we have to understand that God separated light from darkness at the beginning, right? So he knew that in this world, in this creation, there's this element of duality, like this element of, in order for, and I use the word order, not in the New World Order sense, but in order for order to exist, like things that are in shape, formed as shapes and things to exist, there needs to be a backdrop or a counter to that, which is sort of chaotic or dark matter, or, as a scientist call it, or whatever. Like there has to be this opposite to hold up this goodness. And so while God may have created some of these things, and he may allow some of these things, I don't think he's necessarily the agent of it, right? So he's not necessarily the agent of evil. He's not like doing evil for the sake of just being evil. Because remember what I said earlier about God is good all the time, and that God, everything is working out for good, right? So if you think of it in that term, then there's a greater agenda of God that we may not be seeing in these little isolated events that work out for his ultimate purpose and his ultimate good. And so it's not so much that like, how can God allow evil or allow all this stuff? It's kind of like, no, it's part of the way creation was made so that we as agents within this creation construct are able to experience things like love and joy and peace and all the fruits of the Spirit, right? And God tells us to go there because there is another side to this. There is the dark side, and we can choose to go there too. We're free to do that. But if we're going to align with God's ultimate destination of where he wants to ultimately take creation, where he will ultimately take this world and each one of our souls, for those of us who believe, then we pursue the things of Christ, right? So it's not so much like works-based salvation. It's just how we conduct our lives. And when you're saved, remember, you have a change of heart, a renewed mind. I did. It wasn't like this one day I woke up and poof, I was different. But there were certain aspects that were definitely like that. Like for me, I always use this example, cursing, dropping the F word and the S. And I still do occasionally if I'm like, playing sports or something happens, I step on a rock, whatever. But to use it in my everyday vocabulary, that like for some reason I was very convicted of that, and as soon as I was saved, I'm like, I'm not going to talk like that because I just don't feel like it's honoring God. And I don't feel like it's something that I need to do to be cool or whatever it is. And then it's really fascinating because you start looking around and you start seeing other people talking like that. And you think, my goodness, did I look like that? Did I sound like that? Where, every other word is the F word and this and that. I think I'm cool and all this stuff, but in reality, it's just, you're blaspheming God. You're just, man, it's just not good. So I just think we forget that there's an individual personhood choice here within each one of us to go towards the truth that was shown to us through Jesus Christ or move away from it. And God loves us the same either way, but we have a choice in that. So we can't forget our own roles in this. It's not, yes, God is in control, but we have a role to play as well. And that's part of the gift of life, right? That we get to play this out. And I think we live in a very unique time because of all this stuff, because obviously things are going crazy, and I think ultimately, like I said earlier, with the book of Revelation being how, strange as it is, maybe part of how, like someone said, the demonic supercomputers or whatever, messes up this creation to the point where God has to intervene and roll this heavens up like a scroll and give a new heaven and a new earth, because this one is going to be utterly destroyed. So, let's see what else. Let me see here. What do you think of Eastern Orthodox Kostas? I don't know a whole lot about it. I'm not an expert on that. I'd have to get back to you. I'd have to do a little research and really dig into some of that. Because it is, these are big topics that people in academia have been talking about for centuries. So I'm not going to be able to necessarily comment. Oops. Okay. That was my wife, so I got to get going. That's a phone call from my wife. But I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this. Thank you so much. I will post again when I can. Again, I got family stuff going on right now, so it's been difficult to make videos. But again, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.